Okay, we're reading from The Manipulated Mind by Denise Wynn. We're in chapter 6, and this is video number 7. Festinger showed the power of cognitive dissonance at work in another interesting way. He and an associate asked students to help in an extremely boring, repetitive manual task as part of an experiment. Afterwards, all the students were asked to tell individually another student who was also to participate in the same experiment that the task was rather interesting. To motivate them to tell this lie, some of the first team were offered $1, others $20. The first team were later asked to give the reactions to the task they had to complete. Those paid $20 to say it was interesting to another student admitted they found it boring. Those paid only $1 tended to say that the task was quite interesting really, and more meaningful than they had imagined. What was happening was that both sets of students had to justify to themselves the telling of the lie. Those who had been paid a considerable amount of money needed only to say, "I did it for the money." But those who received a pittance couldn't convince themselves that that was the reason for their lie. So they had to convince themselves that they hadn't really lied at all, and that really there was something interesting about the task they had to do. On the same basis, though probably without knowing why, parents often find mild rebukes more effective in stopping disruptive behavior in children than heavier threats. If a child is threatened with death and destruction, if he crayons on the curtains, he may stop for the moment. He will think, "I only stopped because I was forced to, but I still want to do it." If he is gently turned to some other activity, he is more likely to justify his change of activity by saying to himself, "Well, I didn't want to crayon on the curtains anyway, really." An amusing experiment first carried out by Smith and then replicated with modifications by Zimbardo showed that cognitive dissonance can make people start to like eating grasshoppers. Supposedly as an experiment in widening the range of menu in a military college, people were asked to try eating fried grasshoppers, an idea that no one found appealing. When a pleasant man made the request, stressing the voluntariness of its nature, numerous people complied, but most still disliked grasshoppers afterwards. When an obnoxious man made the request, earning the dislike of the participants by the rude manner in which he treated his assistant, far more of these who ate claimed to like grasshoppers afterwards. The researchers explained this by cognitive dissonance theory. When the experimenter was a nice guy, the participants could justify their opting to eat something unpleasant by telling themselves they did it because the man was nice enough and they wanted to help him. When the man was not in the least bit likable, how could they justify eating a food that they weren't even being forced to eat? Only by coming to find that the food itself was quite palatable really, therefore justifying their decision to give it a try. Elliot Aronson has said dissonance theory does not rest upon the assumption that man is a rational animal. Rather, it suggests that man is a rationalizing animal, that he attempts to appear rational both to others and to himself. Theories of cognitive consistency. This need can considerably color his attitudes. An experiment by Aronson himself shows how effort invested in an activity can alter perceptions of the activity's worth, all in line with dissonance theory. A group discussion on the psychology of sex was announced. Girls who wanted to join it were divided into 3 groups. One group was just given permission to join. The other 2 groups were given some sort of test to see if they were suitable. In one case, the initiation was mild. In the other case, it was strong, the girls being required to recite swear words in front of a male experimenter. Afterwards, all the girls were played a tape, supposedly of a similar psychology of sex discussion that had been held before. The tape was deliberately made extremely boring. Only the women who had suffered the severe initiation process said they found the discussion interesting. Aronson concludes that the effort put in to joining the group could only be reconciled with achieving something that made it all worth it. Therefore, it would have been impossible for the women who had been made embarrassed to perceive the discussion as boring and to face the fact they had invested considerable energy in nothing. Aronson himself admits that there could be other explanations for the girls' behavior. Perhaps the very reciting of swear words excited the girls and made them anticipate pleasure. Or if the initiation had embarrassed them, perhaps the discovery of the discussion was in fact banal and not in the least threatening was such a relief that it colored their judgment of the content. But the outcome is still all too obvious, the same defense of something worthless. On the same principle of effort making requiring rewards, Zimbardo, Brehm, and Cohen have found that a speaker who has low credibility can often sway an audience over to his side more easily than a speaker with all the right credentials and reputation. If the people in the audience have had to make an effort to get to hear him, to travel a long distance and then to disagree with an expert is not tension-inducing because the expert is usually considered to be worth hearing. But to go out of one's way to hear someone who has no standing and talks nonsense is more difficult to reconcile with one's own intelligence. Therefore, it may be easier to resolve the conflict aroused and the questioning of one's own integrity by finding something to agree with the man about. What is dissonant for one may not be dissonant for another. If a person with a strong self-image feels his marriage isn't working, he may be inclined to stick with it like a leech, to justify his belief in his own judgment of people and the effort he has already made to make the relationship work. I can't let go now. It will make the last 6 years seem worthless. The person who has a low self-image and who always expects to have everything go wrong will not experience the tension of dissonance in the same situation. Just my luck, nothing ever works out for me. The bad relationship confirms what he thinks of himself instead of threatening it. And that was part 7 of chapter 6, and I will see you in the next video as we will be reading from part 8 of chapter 6.